Do you like fishing small, light lures, but you just wish you could cast a little further with them? If so, stay tuned. This video's for you.
All right, so let's talk about the first thing in casting light lures that I would say is the most important aspect of all of this, and that's the gear. So you can cast, you can have techniques and do whatever else, but if you don't have the right gear, you're done. You're not going to be able to cast light lures as effective as you want, or at all, right? So we're going to talk about the rod, reel, and line here. We'll start with the reel. This, to me, is the least important aspect of the three. I typically go with a small 1,000 size reel. Typically, you're going to be going for trout, bluegill, crappie, small bass, stuff like that. So you don't need something very big. You don't have to go super nice with the reel. The line and rod is definitely where you want to spend a little bit more on this, or just prioritize. The main thing is your line on the spool. It needs to be up to the very top, because if it's not, that is force right here, right? That is just a little bit of give that line has to hit as it's going out, and that can be a difference in a couple feet if it's not spooled up correctly. So just make sure your reel is spooled up all the way to the max so it can perform as good as it can for you. Getting into the most important part here, and that is the line on this reel. So thin line is hands down the most important factor in all of this. The thinner the line, the farther you're gonna cast. Now, a lot of people like fluorocarbon for this type of stuff. I prefer braid because braid is thinner than a fluoro or a mono. So here I have 6-pound braided line. This is Suffix 832. I prefer the braids that have the slicker coating on the top. So for instance, the standard Power Pro, you can run your finger and you can feel the braid. You can feel those braids in there. And to me, those just don't cast as good as the super slick ones. So Power Pro does make a Super 8 slick. It's an 8-strand. That one's super nice to cast. The Suffix 832 is awesome. I also like the Daiwa J braid is pretty smooth. There's a lot of brands that I will have linked below that I prefer, but the main thing is the thinner, the better. This is a big reason why people prefer fluorocarbon over mono for this type of stuff, is because fluoro is thinner than mono. It's not as thin as braid, but it's still pretty dang thin. So a fluorocarbon would be awesome. I typically won't go over a 6-pound on stuff like this where I'm throwing super light lures. I won't go over a 6-pound test. I have 6-pound braid right here, and I've got a 4-pound fluorocarbon leader to the end of my line, and that's it. So yes, lowest diameter possible on that line. It's just gonna help. It's gonna reduce memory, and it's just gonna cast farther. It's gonna go through the eyelets nice. It's just less resistance going through the eyelets of the rod, and it's gonna allow your cast to be better. So line is number one most important part on this. One last thing about line here, if you are using braid or you're using any rig where you have a leader material, for instance for me, right, like I said, I have 6-pound braid to a fluorocarbon leader here, make sure that knot is cut as thin as possible. Now obviously you don't want to cut the tag end so that it breaks, but you do not want any little tiny piece of tag end sticking out on that knot, because as it goes through the eyelets and it hits those eyelets, that is more resistance, and that could cut off feet. I mean, we're talking that could cut off 10 feet on your cast. So make sure that knot, I tie an Albright knot, they're pretty thin, they cast nice. Make sure that knot is as thin as possible. All right, so the rod to me is very important. It's not as important as the line, but it's much more important than the reel. So right here, I have an Okuma Guide Select Pro. This is a 7'6" ultralight. I would actually prefer for this type of stuff a 6 to 7 foot. There's a couple other videos, and people online that I've read, and I agree with them on this. Sometimes too long of a rod doesn't help you with casting light lures. So for me specifically here, like if you were to be using an 8-foot rod with this jig that I have right here, you are not casting out as far as if you had a 7-foot. And I don't know why. I think it's just the more rod there is, sometimes there's a little bit more bend and it just doesn't have that flick that you want. So for me, a 6 to 7 foot is ideal, right? You definitely want a fast action or a moderate fast. You don't want a super bent rod, because then there's going to be no extra throw to whip that thing out, right? But you also don't want it too stiff. So for me, a moderate fast to fast is kind of what I want in that. Like I said, the 7.6, it's working great for me today. It's a little bit long for this type of stuff, but I'm targeting big trout on light line, so I want as tall of a rod as possible so that I have the most play in the rod and it takes less of that pressure on the line. So yeah, for rod, 6 to 7 foot, ultralight or light. is going to be what you want to go for this. All right, now that we've talked about some gear here, I'll talk about the baits in a little bit. We're just throwing these super micro jigs today. It's like a 1/80th ounce jig head, a little frostbite mini slayer on there. It's just like a little paddle bait. It's meant for ice fishing, but it works great in this type of stuff in open water. So we're gonna go toss this around here. I'm seeing some fish cruising already, some fish rising. I think we're gonna pick up some fish. I think it's gonna be a fun day. So cool, let's go get them.
Ooh, nice fish out there. Okay, he's coming to it. He's coming to it. He's coming. Oh, here he comes. Oh, he's right there. Where'd he go? Got him. That was cool. That was so cool. Oh, that was so cool. Right on his head. Right on top of his head. I did not mean to cast that close to him, but he smacked it the second it hit the water. Oh, that was awesome. That was so cool. I had to bomb that thing out there too. Some of the fish, you don't need to cast very far. They're right on the bank. But then others, like that one, you know, he was kind of wary when he was close to me, but the second I put some distance between him and me, his whole attitude changed and he came up and mashed that little frostbite mini slayer. Oh, that was cool. Beautiful fish as well. Oh, he's fat. Nice, got him. That was so cool. Oh, that was awesome. Oh my goodness. There we are. Beautiful, beautiful cutthroat. My goodness, it does not get better than that right there. And that was a perfect example of something that, you know, if I didn't have a light lure and I was casting far out to him, I would not have landed that fish. So I'm glad I caught him like that because I just proved my point of this entire video. Light lures and far casts are deadly, especially for finicky fish. One more look for you guys. Beautiful West Slope cutthroat. Come here. Man, they are squirmy. There he goes. That was a perfect example of why long casts are just money, especially with light lures, but there's definitely a technique to it to catch fish. All right, I'm gonna show you guys a couple techniques in terms of how I cast, how I cast it out there farther. Obviously, gear is the most important, but there are some things you can do here as well that will help you out. Typically for me, I have it a couple feet from the bait to the tip of the rod, right? So some people do this, long thing here. Some people like really up close. I like right in the middle. So about 2.5 feet, I would say is probably about what that is. Sideways versus overhead, to me it doesn't matter. I think you can cast out just as far either way. However, there is a thing for me in terms of using the momentum is huge, right? So obviously you can just go like this and cast, and that works great. But sometimes if you want to just give it a little twirl, right? So you can kind of feel that weight pull back on the rod. The point is you want to kind of load that rod up a little bit first, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go like this, and then I'm going to put it out there. And as you saw, that went a pretty dang far ways out there. Also, using the wind to your advantage, right? So I've got a little breeze coming in this way, so it's not too big of a deal. But if that breeze were to really pick up, that can seriously affect your casting. So for me, I would want to go to the other side of the lake where that wind is kicking this way, and I'm going to cast out way farther than before. So that's another thing to think about too with this. Kind of get creative with it. There are certain baits that you may, figure out, hey, I can cast it farther like this, or, each bait is different, right? So do what you need to do for each bait. I like a little sidearm cast. Overhead is really nice when I have the room. Even right here, actually, I do have the room for it. But sometimes, especially where I'm fishing today, I don't have the room a lot of times for that big overhead cast. So sometimes that little sidearm can get you, casting out to an area that maybe is, you weren't able to cast to before, which is nice. Also, if you're really just not getting out as far as you need to, throw a bobber on, right? Throw one like a little clear bubble or, you know, a little weighted float, even a little trout magnet float. Just something a little bit extra can help you get out farther. Oh, that was a nice fish that just smacked me. Ooh, big fish right here. See if he'll come up and grab it right here. Yep, he's coming. He's coming. Got him. Cool. That was so cool. Ooh, he's fired up. He didn't hit it the first pass, and then he turned on it. He just kind of looked at it, and then I jigged it away from him, and he did not like me running that thing away. Cool. Oh, that was so cool. So fun watching him eat. He's got good colors on him too. He's probably a male. Got him. There is just something about this little bait right here that just is mashing these gorgeous cutthroat. I mean, look at that fish. That is so cool. Woo! And there he goes. How cool.
All right, so let's talk baits here for a moment. Now, when I'd say small baits, this is what I'm thinking, right? This right here is a Frostbite mini slayer on a little Gamakatsu jig head. That thing has been awesome for me. We have here a little Berkeley Power Worm on a 1/80th ounce jig head. And then we also have little hair jigs like this. Obviously, these are, you know, your jigging type baits. Then you've got your super, well, that's a bigger spoon, but we got your smaller spoons, kind of like this guy. That's the Fior Junior. Love that one right there. You know, you have your super small spinners like these. These are just like tiny Panther Martins, stuff like this. And then you have your flies, right? You have your bubble, you know, your clear bubble. Yes, this does add some weight, you know, but it's still a lighter rig, right? You still have to bomb it out there. And that's why knowing, you know, how to cast that gear is going to really help you out. One thing I watch out for with baits is anything that is super bulky, right? Or not dense. So this guy right here, that's a pretty dense lure for the most part. That's also a big jig head, so that one you're going to be fine. Now this one right here, the little Berkeley Power Worm, it's not a very, you know, big lure, not a very heavy lure, but you would be surprised how far I can cast that thing out there because it's dense, right? It's just the worm, the hook, that's it. There's no hair, there's nothing else going on. This thing is slim, it gets down quick. Like, this thing can cast pretty dang far considering its size. On the opposite spectrum, we have a hair jig. Same profile, right? Smaller profile like this, and I love hair jigs as much as the next guy, but little hair jigs like this with a lot of hair on them, that is bulky, right? That is going to catch. When you're casting it in the air, that is not going to cast very far. Typically, I'm going to use these more for a vertical jigging type thing, or if I'm, you know, casting out on a boat and then I'm kind of jigging it up and down. You can still do this, especially if you wanted to do a clear bubble with it. But for the most part, these are going to be pretty hard to cast because of that hair. Another good example of that here is the spoon versus spinner. You are going to get a spoon out way farther than you are a spinner. And the reason why is because the spinner has that big blade there, and that blade is catching wind and air, you know, as it casts out. So you're not going to cast a spinner, even though they're the same weight. You're going to get a spoon because it's so compact, right? Especially if it's tungsten. That thing is going to go way farther than a spinner. So something to think about here, right? There's a spot maybe where you really need to cast out to catch a fish. You've got to consider what lures are you throwing to it. Yes, maybe you like a spinner more than a spoon, right? But sometimes you just can't get a spinner out there, right? Same thing here. There's certain times, like for instance today, I would love to be throwing that little hair jig out, but I just don't think it's going to get out far enough compared to this guy right here, or compared to even the Berkeley Power Worm, which will catch me a ton of fish here as well. So something to think about when you're choosing baits here. You know, make sure it is dense. One lightweight presentation that works really good for trout, also can work for crappie and bass as well, is a float and fly rig, which is basically using flies on spinning gear. If you guys don't know how to tie that rig, I will put that right up here for you. I would recommend watching that video. I've also got another video right here I think you guys would like as well. So hope you guys got a kick out of today's episode. We'll see you guys next time.